Hello Internet! With the addition of Firefly, I thought it's prime time for me to make a tier list for this current version. But before we start though, disclaimer. This entire video is my opinion based on my experience, so yeah, feel free to disagree, but I hope you keep it civil. Secondly, rather than keeping everything in one big list, I've separated them via their roles. I think that's a lot more fair. And thirdly, this list is based on MOC, and all the 4 stars are at E6. And finally, I've arranged this tier list from top to bottom, not from left to right, so the leftmost character is not the strongest. And enough yapping, let's start. Here is the DPS tier list that I've cooked up. The first tier, we have the S tier, which features awhile and Firefly. I think this is pretty undisputed. These two characters are insanely strong. To break it down though, we have Firefly, which just got released this version, and I'm sure you've seen enough showcases of Firefly just dunking damage upon damage and taking multiple turns as well, dealing at least 200k every time she takes a turn. The simple reasoning is that she is very strong to begin with, and for the fact that currently the entire MOC with the turbulence as well are all skewed towards break DPS, all of which helps Firefly, making her incredibly strong. Certainly deserved of the S tier. As for the case of Acheron, she has been dominating as the queen of DPS for quite a while now, and even currently, her numbers are still insanely high. If anything, I've made a video comparing these two. The conclusion is that Acheron can still be neck and neck compared to Firefly in this version, which that is incredible. And yeah, there you have it, the S tier. I think this is pretty straightforward. They are both really strong. Moving on, we have the A tiers. These are the characters that are really strong, but not as strong as the likes of Acheron, Firefly, yeah? We see characters like Dill and Dr. Ratio, both of which deal a bunch of damage. One is multi-target, one single target. There's really not much doubt with these two. They all can still do their job well, dealing a bunch of magic damage without stop. But the simple fact is that they're not as strong as, say, Acheron and Firefly, which feels oppressive to use. Still though, very strong characters. As for the rest of the list, we have the likes of Jingliu and Kafka. These two characters are introduced quite a while back and are still quite strong even till today. The simple reason is that their numbers are high enough and that they still have the gimmick to prove themselves worthy in this version. For the fact that in the current version, there's a lot of stages that includes a lot of enemies, multi-target DPSs like Jingliu or just, AoE DPSs like Kafka are still the DPSs that perform well. Hence why I put them in this tier. Silly, not as good as the ones above though. And the final person in this tier would be Boothill. This guy's a tragedy because he's pretty much replaced now as the second strongest break DPS to Firefly, and that really sums him up, the second strongest break DPS. The only issue that he really has is that you need to take a bit longer to rack up the pocket trick shot. The moment you do, he's an unstoppable force that the moment you break someone, you're doing 200k, 300k every turn. And just like Firefly, he can implant their own weakness, which is really good for someone that really relies on weakness breaking. And for all that reason, I think he's A tier. Moving up next, we have the B tier. Now, I will be breaking down each and one of these characters, well, it will just take way too long. But yeah, in this tier, I consider these characters good, but not as prominent as anyone in A or S tier. With the likes of Clara and Blade, which the only issues they really have is that you have to get hit, but otherwise, they're just really strong. As for the older characters like Jingyuan and Sela, they each have their own little issues, with Jingyuan being the moment you control, which there's a lot of control right now in the enemies, Lightning Lord would not be able to take a turn, and that sucks. But in the best team setup with enough cleanse, he can still do a bunch of AoE damage. However, it is still true that Lightning Lord does not get faster. That means his damage will always have a limitation. And for the case of Sela, currently the meta simply skews towards multi-target DPSs. If you're fighting MOC 12's second side, you'll be facing 3 elites that don't spawn enemy mobs, which simply isn't the best environment for someone like Sela that wants to kill the mobs to get that extra turn. As for the final 2 4 stars, we got Qingque and Xueyi. Qingque, as you know it, you need to get lucky, so on a good day, she might even be an A tier character. But there's RNG involved, hence why I put her here. And finally, we have Xueyi, which is actually a break DPS that the current version so heavily favors. But I certainly think she's a tier lower than Boothill, which is why I have her in this tier. And moving up next, we have the C tier. These are the characters that are probably just not designed for Emerald Chaos, or they might just not be better than the ones above them. There are actually a lot of good characters in Honkai Sharo, so it's getting pretty hard to say which characters are even bad at all. But to start with, Argenti and Hibiko. These two are pretty simple. They're designed for pure fiction rather than MOC. But you want to force your way and use them in MOC, you still could, but certainly don't expect them to do just a bunch of damage to a singular boss, right? And up next, we feature 3 of the 4 stars. To start with, Misha. The only real issue that Misha has is that his ultimate is a bound skill, so you don't get to choose where all of them go to. In the current MOC, there are a lot of characters that spawns a bunch of mobs or just multiple enemies in a wave that you have to clear. For Misha's ultimate, you do a lot of damage to, say, a singular boss since it's 10 hits on one person, but currently though, he can be a bit inconsistent since you'll spread out all the L damage, right? Hence why he's in this tier. And as for Serval though, she's certainly the 4-star version of Jingyuan in my opinion. That's the main stat that a 5-star Jingyuan has, which is why I think it's realistic to put her in this tier rather than saying if she has really good relics, she can be as good as Jingyuan. And as for the case of Sushang, the most effective build for her currently, I would say, is a break DPS build similar to Xueyi. She's actually incredible at breaking enemies and just taking multiple turns to do her E, get your skill point back, do damage again. But unlike the rest of her break DPS, DPS, she doesn't have an ability to ignore weakness or implant her own weakness, which is her Achilles heel. If you were to use her as a traditional DPS that relies on crit and crit damage, yes you can, but I would actually say in this version the break effect one is more prominent. In any case though, not as strong as someone like Shueyi or Boothill, which is why she's in this tier. And moving up next, we have the D tier. These are the characters that are just not too great right now. To start, we have Wind and Hang. Similar to Seal as well, you actually want to kill stuff with Wind and Hang on the LT to get an extra turn on the E. That's how you maximize his damage, but currently there's not too many stages with mobs that you can do that on, which puts her in this tier for me. We also have Herda, which is a pure fiction character. As for Hook and Yanqing, Hook is a character for me that does damage and has a bit of sustainability to herself. Something like a jack of all trades, master of none, which means that her damage output doesn't really outshine anyone else. Oh well, she can heal a little bit though. A usable character, but not too strong. And as for Yanqing, well, for a favorite victim of Honkai Star Royale, the real issue that he has is that the moment you lose Soul Steel Sync, he is so very much weak. And there are way too many enemies that can really easily do that to you. Not to mention, he does have RNG to his kit too. On a good day, he'll keep proccing, but on a bad one, he won't proc any. And in the end, he's a single target character that doesn't rely on break, so this version is certainly not his version. Poor Yanqing, dude. Moving up next, we have the final tier. These are the characters that are not really too usable at all. We got Arlen and Physical Trailblazer. Arlen's a character that takes away HP, which guarantees that you must run a shield character with him. His damage output at low health is good, but not as good as, you know, some 5-stars for sure. And overall, it's a really risky play to just have your DPS be at low HP all the time. I'm sure you already know about Arlen, hence why he's in this tier. And as for Physical Trailblazer, well, similar to Hook actually, they have some heals. They have some defense buff as well to themselves. However, they're still designed to do damage. They don't have an unreplaceable specialty to them, which makes them not really too sought after, right? Not to mention, chances are you're using Harmony MC, so don't think you keep them as physical. And that marks the end of the DPS list. Moving on, we have the support list. And to start is the S tier. Undoubtedly, it is Ranmei. Currently, the whole meta skews towards break effect. Ranmei is the best break effect buffer. Put two and two together, right? I almost think she's too strong, and then I think there needs to be a 4-star variant that helps break effect. At least we don't have to just get broke pulling Ranmei and Firefly in the same version, man. Dude, it's just too brutal. Moving on, we have the A tier. Here you see Black Swan, Topaz, and Robin, which are past meta, right? You have the dot meta, you have the full attack meta as well. They're all very strong, but currently not as strong as the break meta, which means they're a cut below Ranmei. And the odd one out here would be Harmony MC. I would honestly say the fact that she's here is insane because, well, she's terrible unless you put them in a break team. But if you do put them in any break team at all, the value that they bring immediately rises incredibly. However though, unlike Ranmei that still buffs you in terms of damage, gives you speed buffs as well, and weakness for efficiency, that's just generally useful everywhere in any team. Harmony MC is safely at A. Don't think I can put her in S. And as for the B tier, here we see the buffers or debuffers that are generally useful. To start with Pella and Zerwolf, these two are featured in one of the best Arc Run setups ever, which means their value will always be there, along with the best DPS in the game. And generally speaking, you can never have too much defense reduction. Plus, with the likes of Zerwolf, you can even implant weakness as well, helping your team even in breaking. As for the list of buffers, we have Bronya, Tingyun, Asta, and Hanya, all of which I think is fair, but Bronya here would be the odd one out because usually I'll put Bronya in A, but I personally think I can't say Bronya is as good as someone like Robin, which just straight up pushes your whole team to get an extra advance, but she's still fairly strong. I think I may need another tier in between A and B just for Bronya to be there. I feel like that would be too convoluted. She's a strong support along with the rest in the same tier, but I don't think she's as good as the rest at the A tier though. Those are characters that are really good in the best setup. Plus, there's also Sparkle now in the game. Bronya is no longer the only person that can action advance, hence I put her in this tier. Moving up, we have the C tier. To start with, well, which really isn't a character that's needed for any team, unlike a Pella or Zerwolf in the Akron setup, right? He's actually the most unique debuffer at the moment because he's the only person that delays the enemy in the form of debuffs and imprisonment. No one else actually does that. However though, in the current meta, it's not like you need to do that to anyone at all. It's either you just break the enemy and kill them or use Akron and kill them. The value of slowing them down and imprisoning them isn't too high in my opinion currently, but in the future though, that may change. Hence why I put him in this tier. Up next, we have a couple of dot characters in Sambo, Guinaifen, and Luca. They're all dot support slash sub DPS that you might want to slot in depending on their weakness, right? Against a physical enemy with Luca as a sub DPS and debuffer, it'll be really strong in a dot team. Not so much otherwise, which is the same for the rest. And generally, I don't think they're prominent enough to match the likes of Pella and Zerwolf in the tier above them, which is why I have them in this tier. And finally, we do have a Fire Trailblazer, which you may argue that she's a sustain, but truth be told, there are less people who use her as sustains these days. It's more like a break effect supporter with debuffing abilities as well. However, though, what she can bring on the table is not too prominent in this version. Plus, nobody's keeping their main character as not Harmony MC, right? Which is why I placed Fire MC here. Chances are you don't even have her already. You've got your hat on, you're Michael Jackson. And finally, we have Yukon, who's actually pretty good in the sense where if you give her, say, Meshing Cogs and use basic attack a bunch, use her ultimate only to buff your DPS, and that is how you usually use Yukong. However, again, I don't think she's quite at the level of the tiers above her, which is why I've earned this tier. Notice though that the top 3 tiers are all really good, which makes the last tier not as bad as you think. Generally speaking, all the characters in this game are usable and have their niche, some more versatility than the other, and only a few are outstandingly good. So keep in mind that I'm not saying the C tier characters are terrible. I'm mostly just saying in the current version they are not as prominent. And finally, we have the sustain list. These are the characters that help you survive. Top of the list with S tier, we've got Aventurine. I think this is pretty much a no-brainer. Not only that he protects your team well, he damn near gives you immunity to all debuffs as well. And the best part is you may not even need to use a skill point at all. You can just keep using basic with him and use your ultimate to gain the shield back slowly. He's also the go-to choice for follow-up attack setups and a very strong choice for an Akron team if you give him Trend of the Universal Market as Lyco. And on top of all that, he can still debuff while do decent damage as well, especially on his ulti. This guy can do everything, man. Safely in S tier. And moving on, we have Fushan. She's basically a more protective type of Aventurine. With Aventurine, you might sometimes have your shield be broken and still take some damage, but with Fushan, you'll nearly never ever die. On top of that, she gives you crit buff as well, and a one-time immunity for debuffs, which is why I still think she's one of the top sustains out there, deserving even the S tier. Moving on, we have Fofo. With Fofo, you have total immunity to all and any debuffs. At the same time, you regenerate energy on the ulti as well. A character that can do all that as a sustain. I still think is one of the top healers out there, which is why I still have her in S tier. And finally, we do have Luocha. The only big difference to Luocha is that he doesn't really have anything to help offensively, but what he can definitely do is just using basic attack to generate skill point completely and still keep everyone alive with a free heal. He also has a cleanse on him with a near infinite heal uptime, which is why I still think he's an S tier sustain. Moving on, we have the A tier. Here we see impressively a Gallagher. I would argue that I could put him at S, especially in this version considering it's a break effect meta. Having Persona the break team while the enhanced basic does a lot to the toughness bar as well. It's just the top choice for any break team. Very strong. Up next, we have the B tier, which features Japart, Lynx, and Bailu. All of them are usable, but they do have slight issues, right? With Japart and Bailu, they both don't have a cleanse, but they both can protect the team quite well. And for the case of Lynx though, she's a balance of high healing and cleanse as well. I don't think all 3 of these characters are at the level of Gallagher in this version though, so hence why I've have them in this tier. And finally, we have March and Natasha. I would say in the case of March, as a sustain, March solely can't even solo sustain well, so I'm having issues even calling her a sustain. She's more like a support debuffer, right, with the freeze and stuff. But regardless though, March isn't an MOC character in my opinion. She's more so a Golden Gear or similar to Uris character that can abuse the Remembrance path. That's why I have her in this tier. And as for the case of Natasha, she's basically Lynx light. She can't heal nor can she cleanse as much as Lynx, and as compared to say Bailu or Japart, Natasha's lower healing capabilities is why I decided to place her in this tier. And with that marks the end of my tier list. After way too long to make this video and I need rest now. But yeah, that will be all. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and remember, these are all just my opinion. I'm no Jesus Christ, so I hope you keep it civil down there. And that is all. Comment down below as well any video ideas you may have. Sometimes I take them and make a video right there. And that will be all. Take care.